Oakland schools have been facing serious challenges of school closures, budget cuts, policy issues, and a major influence and loss of students and real estate to the so-called charter school movement. Action 2020 is an association of residents, parents, and teachers who are determined to see strong supporters of community public schools elected in Oakland this November. For more information about us, please visit action2020oakland.org. The three candidates for the District 3 seat joining us today are Mark Hurty. Mark is a former OUSD special education teacher, currently working for educational equity in the nonprofit sector. VanCedric Williams. Van has worked with students, parents, and communities focusing on racial justice, including equity issues for union members. Cherisse Gash. Cherisse is a graduate of Oakland schools and a native of Oakland, and a proud mother of an OUSD 2020 graduate who is going on to Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia. Cherisse is a strong advocate for students and teachers. Asking questions on behalf of Action 2020 is Stacy Thomas, a resident of District 1 in Oakland. Asking follow-up questions will be Kitty Kelly Epstein, an educational expert, writer, and radio show host on KPFA.
Hello, everyone. I'm Stacy and a member of Action 2020. I'll start off with our first question, which is also in chat, and we'll start with Cherisse. Many institutions are attempting to respond to the worldwide demand for racial justice. What does meeting this demand look like for you in Oakland schools?
Well, for me, as a parent, equity in schools means that you need to hire more non-white teachers, and you need to have more Black and Brown representation throughout teaching, administration, and staff. We need to have more systems in play and more funding for our Office of Equity. We need to have, non-racial bias training, and we also need to be able to look and be able to respond to all of the needs of our students that have the most needs. And along with that, we need psychologists and behavioral and structural, and we need to be able to be responsive to the needs of all of our students.
I can't tell if you were saying going to me, Stacy, because you were on mute. But
oh, I'm so sorry. So Mark?
Yeah.
I'll repeat the question. Many institutions are attempting to respond to the worldwide demand for racial justice. What does meeting this demand look like for you in the Oakland schools?
Well, first of all, thank you for having us here today. I appreciate the opportunity to meet and converse with your constituency. So it's great to be with you. I think one of my priorities for the district is bringing a balanced literacy education to the district. And part of that is going to address some of the racial inequities that have persisted in Oakland for a long time. Few of our Black and Brown students are able to read at grade level by the time they're in third grade, which is a significant factor in determining whether they're able to graduate from high school. So I think one of the things that we really need to focus on is making reparations around our education in literacy. And I think that's something that's critical to the change that is necessary. I also agree with what Cherisse had said, that we need to have staff and educators in the classroom who look like the students that they're teaching. It's really important to have role models and to have that sort of cultural sensitivity and appropriateness in the classroom so that young students can see a vision of themselves teaching classrooms themselves in the future. So I think bringing in teachers of color is a critical factor. And I think just generally speaking, improving the outcomes that we have sought to improve over the years, student achievement is a critical factor. It's the thing that the school board should be most focused on and thoughtful about. And so I'm eager to bring my experience to bear on that. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark. And next is VanCedric Williams. Many institutions are attempting to respond to the worldwide demand for racial justice. What does meeting this demand look like for you in the Oakland schools?
Thank you. Thank you for having me as well. Appreciate it. So what I think Oakland schools will start to look like is less decriminalization of our students. Number one, that's really important. We have to make sure we take this opportunity to put a nail in defunding the police, Ousd police. That's really important. Our students should be able to go to a public school and they should be able to graduate and make the best life choices for them. We have a promise to our students to do that. And I think that we should really recognize that and move that forward. Also, we need to create a robust ethnic studies program for our students in Ousd. It really is important to start from K through 12. It's very vital. Our students need to see themselves because a lot of the curriculum is outdated and it doesn't affirm their experience. So we need an Ousd to be able to have curriculum that will be responsive to our students' needs. It is really important. We have to also eliminate testing and really look in a world, in a district that we use a racial, social equity lens to make decisions as we move forward. So I think that by having these ideas, we will hire more Black and brown teachers, counselors, community coordinated individuals, and we will take a look at our institutional and structural practices to revamp them to reflect our students' needs. Thank you.
Thank you. So question 2. Because the Oakland schools, I'm sorry, we're going to start with Mark first, please. Because the Oakland schools continue to owe money on a loan to the state of California, the state continues to have veto power over district decisions through the power of the Fiscal Crisis Management and Assistance Team, otherwise known as FCMAT. They've used that power quite recently in forcing the closing of Oakland schools and other cuts. How will you respond to their power and their actions?
Well, as a school board member, of course, we have the final say as to the school's budget and the district's budget, and that's something that we need to look at very thoroughly. I've just spent the last several months earning a certificate in education finance from Georgetown University with the goal of being able to understand and help to shape the school district's budget more effectively. In order to do that, in order to respond to the need that the district has to retire the debt that it has to the state of California and get out from underneath the FCMAT control, we really need to be thoughtful about the way we operate our budget across the district. I think one of the main things that we need to focus on is delivering more of our resources directly to the classroom, doing that in an equitable way so that the kids that live in the neighborhoods that are currently not well served and don't have quality schools to choose from have a better option in terms of our public schools. And that may mean making cuts in other places. And I think equity doesn't necessarily mean everybody gets the same thing. And in some cases, those who have enough should not necessarily expect to get as much. So I think the school needs to be thoughtful The district needs to be thoughtful about how it uses its resources. And I think getting our hands around the budget and making sure that we're making adequate choices in terms of getting our finances in order and retiring the debt as quickly as possible so that we can move forward and be out from under the FCMAT control.
Thank you. Thank you. VanCedric, next, would you like me to repeat the question or?
Yes, please.
Okay, and it is in the chat. Because the Oakland schools continue to owe money on a loan to the state of California, the state continues to have veto power over district decisions through the power of the Fiscal Crisis Management and Assistance Team, otherwise known as FCMAT. They've used that power quite recently in forcing the closing of Oakland schools and other cuts. How will you respond to their power and their actions?
Thank you for that. So FCMAT has been around since the state takeover. And we have to really start to look at how FCMAT is driving OUSD policy. As a board member, I would, get together with the other board members to really hold our central office accountable for the mismanagement of funds. We really look at our budget to understand that if we cannot control the spending, then someone in the central office needs to be held accountable. That really is the first step, is budget management for us in central office. The second is transparency. We cannot wait until the last moment to be given a budget. And what we do know is that OUSD has to submit their budget numbers to the state of California. The community should have a very clear understanding of what those numbers are, because often those numbers are different than what FCMAT has. And so there's this conflict between the numbers FCMAT is utilizing to cut our schools versus what monies that we have in OUSD. So we know that we have reserves in OUSD, and we have to continue to actually move that conversation forward, that these reserves should go to our schools in most need. I think that this is a community conversation that we have to call FCMAT up, OUSD, bring in our stakeholders, and really look at why the numbers are so different and why FCMAT is trying to cut our schools, our most vulnerable students, our most vulnerable communities. We have to put a stop to that. Thank you.
Thank you. And Cherisse, to you, I'd be happy to repeat the question if you would like.
Thank you, but it's okay.
Okay.
I completely agree with Mark and VanCedric. We really need to get rid of FCMAT. The way that they've been constructing the crisis bases in order to close our school sites has been racially biased towards many of our school sites. And the fact that it is a definite issue of not having a full-on budget transparency at the district office. The fact that we have contracts for consultants that are over $400,000 a year, it doesn't make sense that we can pay that kind of salary and say that we're in a budget crisis or deficit. The fact that we have 1000 Broadway is a highly expensive rental property. And if they want to be fiscally solvent, they could treat themselves like everyone else who has to work in portables and just, be with the people and, save money. We're going to have a surplus coming in. So there's not going to be any need for any disaster crisis of closing any schools. In fact, we need to utilize all of our schools that are going to be here for us, especially with this global pandemic that we have. We need to address our issues of social distancing. And, FCMAT has been living off of OUSD for a very long time. It's really time to cut the ties completely with them. And as a school board member, I definitely want to fight and advocate to make sure that they get their last and final paychecks.
Thank you, Cherisse. Kitty, do you have any follow-up questions? You're on mute.
I wanted to bring forth a follow-up question from our audience and also remind our audience members that you can submit questions and we will get to some of them throughout the forum. I would like to know how you will increase district-wide support for newcomer students. And this is one of the questions from an audience member.
Can we start with VanCedric, please?
Sure. Yeah, hey, district-wide support for newcomer students. So yeah, it's really important that my plan actually is to to eliminate the blueprint for quality schools. I think that is really important for us to actually reduce our expenses. What we tend to do is put more money into overseeing a lot of charter school operations, and we can use that money to actually fund it towards our newcomer students. It's really important that public funds go to our public schools first, and so we will allocate those funds to our newcomer students in need. So we really have to just focus on making sure that public funds go to public schools that will address the newcomers' needs first.
Cherisse, the same question to you. How will you ensure competence and continuity in OUSD administration so good teachers have the support they need and will stay?
We're going to get about $16 million worth of funding coming into the next school year. And we need to make sure that through school site councils and through the LCAP committees, that these funds are allocated properly to the school sites with the most needs. We have a lot of schools that have newcomers who speak different languages, unhoused youth, foster youth, and we need to make sure that the money goes directly to those school sites and that the students have a way to show and prove through their education that it's been of great use to them. And you know, we got to make sure that everything is accounted for with receipts and documentation.
Same question to you, Mark, please. Would you like it repeated?
No, thanks. I want to respond to both the questions. I know that VanCedric got a slightly different question about the issue of newcomers, and this question about continuity and OUSD administration were a little different. I would like to first say that, you know, the top priority that I've identified for what I would want to do as a board member is to adopt a meaningful literacy program across the district, which I think would address to some extent the issue that newcomers face, that, you know, being able to respond to culturally relevant and responsive literacy program is critical for newcomers. As the second part is regarding the competence and continuity in OUSD administration. I think one of the things that we've seen from the grand jury report is that Oakland spends more than 6 times its neighboring districts on classified administration. So it's bloated in the middle. And I think what we need to do is streamline the administration and make sure that we're directing funds to those places that actually help teachers and students.
Kitty, would you like to pick another audience question?
Yes, we have a question from another audience member about how you would repair the relationship between the community and OUSD.
Can we start with Cherisse, please?
Sure. Yeah, we definitely need to repair the relationship. And if that means we're going to hear a lot of angry people screaming, yelling, telling their stories, telling their previous histories. I think we have to be able to hear it and value it and take stock of everything that they've experienced and be willing to advocate for them to have educational justice for them at their school sites and in their communities. Everyone's opinion is valid. We are all members here of Oakland, and we need to work as one community, especially in this global crisis that we're here. We need to come together. So I'm willing to listen. I'm willing to be on school sites. You know, I have the time, and I'm ready to hear from our community.
Thank you. Same question, VanCedric?
Yes, thank you. So, you know, I really believe that action matters. I think OUSD need to really create town halls that will really allow community members to share their concerns. It's just not enough to roll out programs and ask the community afterwards, or make budget cuts and ask the community to take those on. We actually need to reverse the process and engage the community first. We need to, you know, use this process and actually follow through on our promise. Let's go ahead and look in the communities and fund them and show the community members that we're investing in their children, in them as families, and in their community. So that is the first step. But also we need to actually make sure that the stakeholders who are involved in the board meetings actually feel that it's time to stop. Thank you. It's time.
To Mark, please.
Yeah, I would like to just finish what I think VanCedric may have wanted to say, is that I think it's time that the stakeholders that show up at board meetings are treated fairly and safe, and are safe and not confronted by police. I do think that the board's decision to, or the administration's decision and the board's support for defunding the OPD, or the Oakland School Police Department, is a step in that right direction, and it may help to create a system that's not so police oriented at school board meetings. And I think one of the things that needs to happen is, like Cherisse and VanCedric have both said, we need to be listening to the community. The board needs to be open to hearing what the community has to say. And I think this has been a difficulty for the last several months, as there have been very high tension and frankly violent interactions at the board meeting. And I think that's going to stop, and it needs to stop. And I think that's a good step in the right direction.
Thank you, Mark. So we did want to ask about your thoughts on COVID-19. So let's go there, and then we'll return back to the audience questions. For each of you, we're wanting to know what your thoughts are on the reopening, or the lack thereof, in light of COVID-19. Can we start with Mark, please?
Yeah, I work for an organization that is focused directly on this problem. It's Education Superhighway, which focuses on providing a digital bridge for students who are not able to access the internet from home, to make home learning an option for them. And as we're working with organizations across the country in various states of departments of education, what we're finding is that a lot of schools are struggling with the same question, and that there is a difficulty in terms of ever being able to return, or at least for the near future, return to a semblance of what was normal before. That education in the coming year will probably be a combination of in-classroom and home learning. And we need to make sure that we're making provisions for all the students in this district equitably, so that everybody has a chance to take advantage of both an in-classroom experience and to be able to learn at home. And additionally, we need to provide resources for teachers so that they're able to meet with their students in a way at home, so that they're able to provide a high quality instruction and education. I don't think it's realistic that starting in August that we are going to have kids attending schools like they did last August. I think this is going to be a year of experimentation, hopefully innovation, and that we find a way to do that effectively, so that everybody can continue to have access to a quality education. In some ways, it may even give us some opportunities to explore new innovations and ways of teaching that could potentially open up new avenues of learning for students around the city.
Great, thank you. Cherisse, could you talk to us about your thoughts about reopening or not in light of COVID-19?
Sure. Like Mark said, I think August is too soon. Just my personal opinion as a parent. You know, this global pandemic has really been tragic and very traumatic to a lot of our students and families. And we really need to listen to the health experts about the safety and about the social distancing. Our teachers need to have, you know, proper PPE on safety sites as long as the staff as well. And our students and our families need training about if they're actually going to be going on site, what the safety measures will be for them. If it's going to be distance learning, you know, the teachers need tech support, the families need tech support. They're also going to need training on the programs that will be coming up and how to adapt with the distance learning. If there's a situation where we'll come back to school and we have to go back out, we need to treat it like we do our fire drills. We do it on a regular basis, and we train about how to prepare for distance learning. We're going to need a lot of psychologists and therapists for our students, a lot of help and mentor support. This is something that's going to be lasting for possibly 2 years. And it's not an easy or quick fix. It's not something that we have prepared for, and we should have. And we have to take hold that, you know, our students' needs are the best. We don't want to have any more achievement gaps in education. We need to be able to continue and streamline their education from here on out and focus on the needs of our students and the safety of our staff as well.
Thank you, Cherisse. VanCedric, your thoughts?
Thank you. Yeah, there's a lot going on with that. So what we have to do, what we should be doing right now, OUSD should be having a town hall or creating a committee to talk about the reopenings. We need to get stakeholders involved immediately. We have a month. It's July, August, we have 1 month to actually start to decide what that looks like. In addition to that, we definitely need to have medical professionals, expertise to come to our district and really help us through this whole process. We can't rely on social media or the TV. We actually need the medical professionals from the CDC or from Oakland to come on down and be part of this conversation, that we can include our parents and our stakeholders, our labor partners as well. In addition, when we start talking about reopening schools, it's going to cost some money. And so OUSD needs to get together with the labor partners and the community to lobby for funds to reopen some schools, if that is possible. We also have to talk about our particular labor partners who have a fear that, you know, there could be a redemption or that have a fear that, you know, their medical condition may harm them as going to schools. So that is a really strong conversation. It is important that we also look at no co-location of schools during this time. We should have a moratorium on any type of charter co-locations. We have to not have that as part of it. So again, these conversations to be started right now. We can't wait until August. We should have stakeholders involved in the conversation, and it should be very transparent. Thank you.
Thank you, VanCedric. I'm going to turn to Kitty Kelly Epstein and ask her to select a question from the audience And we'll go in order of Mark, Cherisse, VanCedric, and we're trying to keep these audience questions to 1 minute, please.
So this is a combination of two audience questions on related subject. The first is, what is your position on charter schools in the district? And the second is, would you take money from Go Public or other charter supporting organizations? And I know that's a lot to answer in 1 minute, so sorry.
Well, first of all, I think part of the issue with charter schools in Oakland is we have them, and it's not always within our power to simply shut them down. And I don't know for sure that shutting them down in a capricious fashion would necessarily solve the problems that Oakland Unified School District is facing. I think we do need to hold them accountable and find ways to be certain that they are doing their share of serving the communities that are probably underserved in the charter schools. So special ed kids and students who might not be top of the line for charters to choose to join their schools. The second thing, first of all, I want to say that I am a member of Go Public Schools. I have been part of that organization for some time. I don't think of them as a pro-charter organization. I think their interest is in serving public school students across the city of Oakland in public or charter schools. I think their agenda is around quality education. So I would accept support from them if they offered it.
Thank you.
Cherisse, would you like the question repeated or questions?
Sure, please. Thank you.
The question is two questions from the audience combined into one. One is, what is your position on charter schools in the district, and would you take funding from Go Public Schools or other charter supporting organizations?
Okay. I'll start with the second part of the question. I will not take any funding from any charter or privatization of school sites at all. And as far as the current 45 charter schools that we have in the district, we have far too many. At this rate, it's 33% of our district. And if it gets to 50% in our district, our system will go bankrupt in under 2 to 3 years. So it's enough. There needs to be a moratorium on charter schools. Charter schools are not union-based for teachers. They don't have, they're non-classified staff, and they benefit from the small school site models that OUSD has taken away from certain school sites. So they definitely need to be regulated just like public schools, but I think we've had enough here in Oakland. We don't need any more.
Thank you.
VanCedric?
Oh, yes. Thank you very much. I think you can tell from my previous statements that I am not going to take money from charter schools or Go Public. I really believe in public education, that public education should be free, that public funds should be used for public schools. I really think that OUSD will have to really step up to hold charters accountable. One of the things that I'm proud of is that my labor partners and I, where I've worked at, have really organized to get a bill, AB 1505, passed into law, which is holding charters accountable, and being able to deny charter applications and be able to close low-performing charter schools. We really have to hold them accountable. And I also believe that we have to eliminate the blueprint for quality schools. The decentralized process is taken away from our small community school, our small public schools in OU and OUSD. Thank you.
Thanks, VanCedric. Kitty, we have one last question of our own, and we can hold off on that because it looks like we have a few other audience questions. So I'd rather you just go ahead and pick the next audience question, if you will, please, and we can go in order of Cherisse, VanCedric, Mark.
Okay. Here's another audience question. OUSD decisions for cohort 2, and that's in relation to the blueprint process that VanCedric mentioned. will result in 2 vacant campuses this year. How would you address those vacant spaces given the need for social distancing?
I think that our students need to return to their elementary schools and to their middle schools that were closed when we had the pandemic. Our students need to have some familiarity and being able to go back, either whether it be distance learning or whether it be physically to the school sites, I think is imperative for their educational growth. And those school sites need to be utilized. We have to listen to what the state and health and CDC says about having space and social distancing. And the students know their sites and they know their communities, and they never got a chance to say goodbye to folks. So they need to be able to go back and to return as long as it's safe for them to be on site.
Thank you, VanCedric, if you could please.
Thank you. Thank you. Once again, I really believe that our community, our schools that have been put on the list for closure, we should really stop that, put a moratorium on that. What we should be working on is developing our community schools. We should be working on those schools as community hubs. We should utilize this opportunity during the COVID crisis pandemic to provide some services to the community at these vacant school sites. So it's really important for us to look at vacant schools as hubs of community and of support. I think that we have to really address this closure and stop it and look at other ways to re-envision how we can use our schools as community resource centers, as social services for our families who are in desperate need, even to help homeless folks. We should be able to do that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
I agree with VanCedric. I think the idea of community resource centers for unused campuses is an excellent idea. I know that there are folks in East Oakland, Lakeisha Young and the group that's Oakland Reach are working on virtual hubs to be able to support families during the crisis. And I think giving them space to do that kind of work in a real tangible setting would be also a beneficial thing. I think the community has risen up in places where they felt that there haven't been adequate services and adequate schools for their children. And I think we need to listen to those communities and make sure that we are responding as a district to the needs that they are articulating for us. And again, I think this is something that in light of the pandemic, I don't see any alternative for the district than to find ways to spread out the children on the campuses that we do have available. And I think it would be unwise to try to pack kids together. The current situation with the recent explosion of the pandemic is really problematic. So I think we should be thoughtful about that.
Thank you, Mark. Well, we definitely have time for more audience questions. Kitty, can you identify the next one, please? And we can go in order of VanCedric, Mark, Cherisse.
What is your current, this again is an audience question from an Oakland teacher. What is your current relationship with West Oakland community and schools? What will you do to build a relationship in order to truly represent your district?
Thank you for that, most definitely. So my West Oakland community, I've lived in West Oakland for 10 years. And one of the things that I know is how vital our schools are to our communities. First, let me highlight Prescott Elementary is 150 years old. And that has been in West Oakland community for that full time. The second I want to highlight is McClimate. It is the anchor high school with a legacy, long history, and listening to the community members advocating and fighting for respect, they shouldn't have to do that. So as a board member, I will put these schools as at the top of my priority list to really engage these conversations, to bring in the churches, the communities, to be able to really have a voice in and reimagining or to redesign or use their schools in a way that would be a community hub for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark, please.
I agree with VanCedric, and I want to point out that Prescott was also the school where the first Black teacher in Oakland was hired to teach. So this is a historic location for the city of Oakland. I also think that Martin Luther King Jr. Elementary School has an incredibly deep connection to the community and is working on an arts program and a music program. I appreciate the presence of McClymonds, of course, in the district, and I think there's a need to do some reparation around the environmental issues at McClymonds. I know that there's also the Ralph Bunch is a site that's in West Oakland and is a magnet for older students who are needing to find a pathway to careers, and it's an excellent program, and I think is one that needs further attention from the district. And I think we're excited about the possibilities for things to happen there. I've met with teachers and administrators from all those schools, and I'm excited to get to know them better and to do more.
Thank you. Cherisse?
Yeah, as a long-term resident of D3, I attended Martin Luther King Elementary in the mid-'80s, and I remember also Mrs. Minnie West and our music teachers and everyone there, and I really loved the experience in education that they established for all of the students. And I have a lot of memories in West Oakland. And when it's safe to be able to go back onto the school sites, I think we need to directly hear from the community of what they want to happen at their school sites. And like Mark said, and VanCedric said, you know, we need to talk to the communities about the issues of the toxicity in some of the areas, and we need to be able to support the students and the families in that community. We also need to make sure that our central kitchen is up and running. We're available food services and supplies to all of our students throughout the district. West Oakland is a lovely place. It's a historic place, and we're going to preserve it.
Thank you, Cherisse. There was a follow-up question from the audience that is in a similar vein. What will you do to ensure the families of McClymonds High School and the community that environmental issues of that school are being worked on? Can we start with Mark and then Cherisse and VanCedric?
I think I mentioned before, and I think it's critical that the district do what it can to both repair the situation, mitigate the environmental challenges, but also it needs to reach out to and serve the families. There are families from decades past who are experiencing cancer that is a result of being students at McClymonds. And we know that that area is a post-industrial wasteland in some places, and that there are terrible circumstances that need to be addressed. So the district needs to take a proactive stand and move forward with ways to reach to the families that are suffering the consequences of this environmental exposure. And we need to make sure that we've done what we can to mitigate any kind of future exposure.
Thank you. I believe I said Cherisse next. I apologize if I'm mixing up the order.
Thank you. Yes, we need to address the issues of the toxicity at the school site. We need to have nurses available on staff. We need to be very transparent about what's going on in the environment to the families, and to be able to support the students that are there. Like Mark said, there are many family members that have generations of cancer issues, and we need to make sure that if a student is on site, and when it's safe to go back on site, that if they have any issues of health, we need to be able to make sure that they're not being treated as being lazy or being lethargic, that they have a medical crisis that is at hand. And universal health care for the students in that area and for the families there would be most grateful. We want to preserve McClymonds, but we also want to be very safe with our families and our students.
Thank you, Cherisse. VanCedric?
Thank you. So I really want to continue to lift up McClymonds. I believe that OUSD had Measure J, And McClymonds was let down by that. The school district did not follow through with what they should have done. And I think that we really have to call the school district on that. For any other bond measure, McClymonds should be #1, and everything that needs to be done should be actually addressed. No questions asked. McClymonds has waited a long time for this, and the community as well. We really have to make sure that, again, our community schools, we take that, fully resource them, fully fund them. It's no question about it. So we have to not just say that we're going to do something, but actually stand behind it and encourage the other board members to do so as well. It's very important.
Thank you, VanCedric. Can you elaborate on Measure J a little bit, please?
Yes, so the Measure J bond measure promised $475 million to the district based on some facilities upgrades in regards to some of the schools that were needed throughout OUSD. McClymonds was one of the schools that was on that particular list. And over time, McClymonds got pushed to the side. The district ended up taking out leases on property downtown to put the administration down. There was mismanagement of the particular bond measure as well. No accountability, the lack of auditing and holding anyone accountable just was not the case. So I think that there have been some wins, that some schools have definitely got an upgrade, revamped fields and rebuilt schools. But what we're really talking about, again, is how West Oakland has been treated in this particular, this measure. We need to really respect the community, respect the history, respect the activism, and really hold firm with OUSD with any other bond measure that must be accounted for, must be audited, and must be really held accountable for actually doing what they say they're going to do. Thank you.
And thank you, VanCedric. Cherisse or Mark, would either of you or both of you like to take a minute to talk about that measure?
I would go ahead, Cherisse.
Thank you. No, VanCedric explained it very well. And yes, there has been a history of not utilizing the bond measures in the proper way for school sites that are in predominantly Black and Latino areas. And I believe that the board members need to take accountability for that. And as becoming a board member, you know, I would put priority for those school sites. And we have many school sites that definitely need restructuring with the facilities. And it has to go to them first. Instead of leasing the properties off to charter schools for 40-year leases because we don't want to fix up the buildings, we have to maintain the buildings for the students and the families in the communities.
I would just like to add that I think there are issues of the environmental concerns in that area that go beyond just McClymonds campus. I mean, the environmental issues surround that entire neighborhood. And I think the city of Oakland needs to step up and take some responsibility for cleaning up that. And then in addition, the school district needs to back up its pledge to repair and update the McClymonds campus as was intended with the Measure J funds. And it's true, those funds were not directed to McClymonds, they were directed elsewhere in the city and for other purposes. If we will have a bond measure on this coming ballot. And I strongly advocate for making certain that we are funding the resources that are necessary to bring McClymonds up to a standard that is reflective of what we think the children in our district need to have for their school sites.
Okay, thank you. Kitty, would you like to select another question from the audience? Because we do have a few.
Yes, one of the questions that a couple audience members were interested in is if you could say specifically what you have done in your life that makes you likely to be a good school board member who's able to accomplish great things for the district.
We'll start with VanCedric and then Cherisse and then Mark, please.
Thank you. So I am a 20-year educator. I teach in San Francisco Unified School District, and I am a 20-year union educator as well. Let me be really clear with that. I'm actually the treasurer of United Educators of San Francisco, UESF. I am also a statewide union member of the California Teachers Association. I've actually advocated, and I'm on the committee for the Budget Committee, the Racial Justice Committee, the REACT Committee. I'm also doing work associated with CFT, California Federation of Teachers as well. I'm on the Racial Justice Committee. Throughout my whole life, I have been advocating for racial and social equity in the classroom, at the boardroom, and in every space that I step into. That has been my life work, and I will continue to push that forward as a racial lens as I move forth. Thank you.
Cherisse, please.
First off, I would like to say my mother is a teacher. She was a teacher in San Francisco for many decades. So I was a student that was literally raised inside the school site. And I'm actually most comfortable being in the school site. As a mother and a parent who recently just had a graduate of Ousd, all I have done throughout his entire educational journey was to advocate for and inclusion. And with that, from being a classroom parent, from being on the PTA, from being on the school site councils, from being in the library committees to make sure we have open libraries in our schools, to being on the LCAP committees, to supporting African American male achievement, to supporting hidden genius and being a volunteer parent for both of those. I have advocated in every aspect and for our students to have inclusion and a better education. You know, educated students make educated voters, and I'm always an advocate of supporting our students and teachers.
Thank you. Mark?
I was raised in a family of teachers and preachers. My mom was a teacher and a principal. My father was a Lutheran pastor. Most of my aunts and uncles and grandparents were either teachers or pastors, and we were raised as feminists and peace activists and social justice warriors. And we worked to serve the communities in which we lived. I have served on the board of a children's theater organization. I've served on the board of a birth-related nonprofit organization, and I've served on the board of a large church in the Midwest when I lived in the Midwest. I have experience working as a board member and understand the role of governance from the board member's perspective. And as I've said, I've recently completed a certification in education finance to be able to prepare myself for this kind of work. We're focusing on student-based budgeting and transparency around budgeting with the purpose of bringing equity to the spending in Oakland Unified School District.
Okay, thank you. Kitty, are there, I'm pretty sure there are still other questions that our audience would like to hear our candidates speak on.
Actually, I don't find another audience question. I have a follow-up question though. I'd like to ask several people mentioned things about achievement and so on earlier on. And then somebody said something about standardized tests. Since the federal government and state governments assess achievement by standardized tests, that kind of ends up being most of the conversation educationally. I wonder if you all have any kind of response to that testing and what it does to education and how kids feel in schools.
We'll start with Mark and then Cherisse and then VanCedric, please.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of the standardized testing measurements that are used to determine whether a school is doing a good job or not. I think, unfortunately, those tests were never designed for that purpose, and their use in that way has really been problematic in terms of how we understand education and student learning and achievement. As a teacher in the classroom, I found that it was much more important to have a personal relationship with the students that I was teaching and understand their skills and abilities and be able to assess them myself beyond the kinds of things that these standardized tests do. The other problem with standardized tests is that they offer no opportunity for the teachers who are teaching that student that year to make any kind of adjustments or to serve the needs of that student, because the results don't come back until well past the time the student has left that particular classroom. So as a summative exam that shows whether or not a student has learned something through the course of a year, they're not effective, first of all, and then they're not useful in terms of being able to help teachers adjust their instruction to meet the needs of the students that they're teaching. So yeah, I don't think that's important. I think evaluating students in the classroom by the teachers with the assistance of perhaps a co-teacher to be able to provide a better picture of where students are academically is a much better method for finding out how our schools are doing.
Cherisse,
Yes.
please. Oh, I'm sorry. Cherisse, please, and then VanCedric. I apologize if I messed that up.
Mark makes great points. And from a parent point of view, there's a lot of inequities within the logistics of doing the standardized testings. For the laptops and inside the school sites for the students, you have tech problems. And so many students don't have access to the standardized testing that is available. And it doesn't reflect of what's actually going on with the student. You know, it's hard to do compliance-based learning just on testing alone. You know, our students in Oakland, they're of brilliant minds, and that shouldn't be the only form of measure for them. And, you know, it doesn't help the students in any way. It's not an equitable process, especially from the corporations that it comes from. So our students need to be freed from that, you know, every 6 weeks testing for that, and just focus more on the intent and the curriculum that's at hand for the teachers.
Thank you, Cherisse. VanCedric?
I agree with Cherisse and Mark, but also I just want to say that standardized testing is really a racial justice issue. It reinforces this like sense of achievement gap, which really doesn't really speak to the challenges of communities and the challenges that are economic and social communities. It doesn't speak to the fact that our communities have been underfunded. And so we have to look at how to eliminate testing, but also at the same time, support measures that will support our community, like schools and community first. I believe that's important. Our schools have been underfunded for too long, and we use this testing measure to try to reinforce these false narratives, and we have to get away from that. We have to look at a holistic assessment, holistic measurement of our child, and see that, you know, there are more things that actually matter in our children's lives than just sitting and taking a test. The UC Berkeley and the universities are getting hip to it. They're starting to understand they're not accepting. They're starting to move away from using testing as a measure, the SAT test as a measure, and they're looking at a holistic version. So we also, as a school district, need to look at our child in a holistic measurement and assessment. And one of those measurements is community, and we need to support our communities. California is, you know, the 5th largest country in the world, and we're at the bottom third of funding. So what we're talking about when we talk about testing is what is not happening with public school. And we need to reinvest that, support our particular schools and communities to pass this measure so we can get measurement.
Thank you, VanCedric. We have, Action 2020 has one more question, and then we probably will still have a little bit of time for a question or two from the audience if they're there. But our final question for each of you, for which we have 2 minutes, is as a board member, how would you work to make OUSD schools happy and caring places for students and parents? Now, admittedly, we've already talked about COVID-19, so I'm not sure that we can assume there is no COVID-19, but I'm going to let you handle that question the best you can, and we will start with VanCedric and then go to Mark and then to Cherisse, please.
Thank you for that. So when I think about a happy place for our students and our parents and communities, I think about the essential workers that we have working in our schools. I really want to first shout out our classified employees. They are the backbone of our schools. They've risked their lives to go and deliver food to our families and members. They've delivered computers. They've checked in on families. I really want to lift them up, our classified and our labor partners. I also want to lift up the parents who really stepped up during this particular time. These are ways for us to come together as a community. This is how we can build our cornerstone, our vision, our democracy, to strengthen our relationships in our community. Like, we really should make sure that we have like pathways for quality education. And we should make sure that our educators feel safe and protected so they can continue to inspire and motivate educators or motivate our students. We should make sure our counselors and our librarians, our bus drivers are all given a fair wage. We actually, by creating a system that everyone is respected, it will build in our relationships with our communities. Our particular, it is really important to have that as we move forth. So I think that, you know, our vision, our goal for happy students and families would be to take care of our workers, our staff, our labor partners, and you will see how that will grow into the community as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Cherisse? Would you like me to repeat the question?
Yes, please. I don't see it in the chat.
Okay. As a board member, what will you do to make OUSD schools happy and caring places for students and parents?
First of all, as a board member, I would have the time to go to each and every school site and be able to listen to the students, listen to the teachers, listen to the staff, listen to the families, and be able to better assess what the needs are for the school sites and the students. We have wonderful schools in Oakland. Each and every one of them is unique and is different, but is vital and is very precious to each one of the students. There's a lot of generational history with each and every one of them. And in order to do that, you have to be able to go into those school sites and to talk with everyone and to hear their stories and hear what is going on at their school sites. In order to create a happy child, you have to create a happy environment for them to be in. And every school site needs to be one for each and one of our brilliant minds here in Oakland.
Thank you, Cherisse. Mark?
I agree with what both VanCedric and Cherisse have said. I think primary in terms of making children and families happy at school is to make them feel safe at school. And I think that's something that we've taken some steps towards that by getting rid of the Oakland school police department. That changes the shape of schools to be less oriented around criminality and more focused on social justice. I think that's a good first step. I also think I look at the Martin Luther King elementary schools big band program. And I think programs like that that really engage students in the arts. And I think about my mother when she was a teacher in Oakland Unified back in the 70s. She was part of a group of teachers that started an arts magnet school in the city of Oakland, a school that was focused on teaching through the arts, and it was done as a magnet school, so part of the district rather than as a charter. This predated charters, but it was a school that allowed kids to experience the joy of art and music and dance, and help them to really express themselves fully, and get beyond just the kinds of standardized testing that we've so focused on today. We had this initiative called No Child Left Behind, which I like to call No Child Gets Ahead, which was about denying the value of arts and music and those kinds of things in education. I think we need to restore those kinds of programs, and that's what makes kids happy. I saw this firsthand in my own classroom, that children who have exposure to the arts are much happier and much more engaged in their learning, and it's vital, and it can be also very culturally responsive, and it can reach out to kids in various kinds of ways that's responsive to their native cultures.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Kitty, would you like to extract anything from the audience questions?
Yeah, I'd like to ask, following up on the question about the Oakland Police Department, which the district has voted to not have a separate Oakland Police Department. I wonder if you could say specifically what your idea is of how there will be school and community safety in another way. Problems do arise. How are they going to be handled since there's not going to be, what's your thought process about how alternatives will be developed?
This one, can we start with Mark and then VanCedric and Cherisse, please? 2 minutes each.
Sure. I think, as I said, I think ending the Oakland Unified School District Police Department is a big win for this district. I think we've seen really effective change that's come about through the restorative justice programs that was instituted on campuses. And we've seen that kind of work is more effective at actually changing the culture of the campus and bringing a cohesion within the communities on the campus. So I'd love to see the district reinvest some of the resources that they are going to be saving by not having the police department instead into the restorative justice programs, and making sure that every site has adequate funding and adequate resources in terms of personnel to handle those kinds of needs. I think that's one thing that can happen. I also think just thinking in terms of the racialization and criminalization of kids, just by ending the police department is a step towards turning our mind away from that negative kind of perception of what kids are doing at school. And tying back to the previous question, if kids are coming to school because they want to be there, because they feel safe, and they're happy to be in school, a lot of these problems won't exist. I think a lot of the challenges that the police department was responding to were the fact that kids in school were not being treated equitably. They were not being treated sensitively in terms of what their needs were. And this is something that I think we should really focus our energies on and be attentive to as we go forward with the cutting of the police department.
Thank you. VanCedric, please.
Thank you. First, I just want to thank OEA for endorsing me. Really appreciate it. We share the same views in regards to defunding the police. Second, I want to lift up BOP, Black Organizing Project, for doing this work. For 10 years, BOP has been asking for OUSD to actually defund the police. That's the community's voice. The community has been asking for this for 10 years or more, and nothing has been done. So I celebrate BOP for being persistent and driving this resolution all the way through. And so we share these ideas, but one thing that we do know is that this is really about an issue that an issue about bringing resources to our students that would help them with mental health, that would help them with positive mediation, that would help them with coordinated relationships with community members. This is about uplifting the security guards who build stronger relationships with that. I think that we have to really be honest and know that this has really hurt the community for so long. Now that we're going to move forward, we're going to have to hold OUSD accountable come December, not even December, come August, come September, come October. We're going to have to stay on top of OUSD to really make this dream come true and put our actions behind it. The community has to stay very involved in this process. So it is about supporting our students in the best way possible. There was no other school police in Alameda County. Oakland didn't need to be there. So we have to continue to make sure that the concerns that we have for OUSD, they're the same concerns that every single school district has through the state of California. And so it's not anything different. It's just that we have to actually implement, we have to actually be honest, we have to be transparent and really bringing these conversations forward. We have to really hold ourselves to a higher standard to the community to say that we believe in our students. Thank you.
Thank you. Cherisse?
That's a lot of time he got there. Yes, it did take OUSD 10 years to listen to Black women organizers who went out and sought input from the community about not having school sites policed. And the fact that OUSD board members had in March the ability to not renew the contract for the years of the OUSD Police Department, and they decided and declined against the needs of the students, the people, and Bob, and renew the contract, and then were forced into, eliminating them after we have a global pandemic, after we have another horrific deaths of Black men in this country. Then they decide. But in March, we still needed the same thing. And years before, we still needed the same thing of not having our students policed in schools. They didn't need to be profiled or anything like that. So moving forward, we need to have the job descriptions of our 86 SSO officers and able to have behavioral, peacekeeping, cultural, and restorative justice for them. Our students ask for restorative justice. They ask for counselors, they ask for therapists, they asked for all of these things before. And for 10 years, they were ignored with all this. And especially for our administrators on our sites, with our students, you have to stop profiling and policing and using compliance-based learning for our students. It is not helpful, it is harmful, it causes depression, and it traumatizes our students. So, and let's, moving forward, not bring anything else called or looking like a police department. There should be no weapons ever coming onto our campuses. Our students deserve more. And hopefully this is a reset to make sure moving forward that our students' lives and our families' lives are respected on their communities.
Thank you, Cherisse. Mark, would you like to add a little bit? We lost our timekeeper and VanCedric was able to speak a little longer. Did you have anything you wanted to add before we move on?
No, I'm fine with my answer. And I do want to say I respect and appreciate what both VanCedric and Cherisse have had to say about this. I think this is it is long overdue. I think that's for sure.
Okay, thank you. Kitty, anything else that you would like to request a follow-up on? Kitty, you're on mute.
Sorry. How would you as a board member push for OUSD to integrate ethnic studies courses into the curriculum? The state has finally said that ethnic studies is to be a part of the curriculum. And so how does this actually come about?
We'll do 1 minute each, please. Cherisse, VanCedric, Mark.
So I believe that'd be inclusion-based learning, and the fact of being African American, our history has not been told in any of our social studies books, and the fact that we built this country and on the blood of the Native Americans that were here, we have always needed inclusion-based education in our history to be factual about what our participation and building of this country. And, you know, for the other immigrants coming to this country and the fact that we live in a port city, this education and the social studies has been denied to people. And you have to stop that. This is now a reset time to be inclusionary with actual history and be able to respect each and everyone's culture, religion, orientation. The time is now to change. So as a board member, I would fund it completely and be on site to make sure that it was accurately implemented on sites.
Thank you, Cherisse. VanCedric, 1 minute, please.
Thank you to all the parents, to all the labor folks, to all the community folks that advocated at the state, on the state level, to make this, to make ethnic studies a viable resource for our schools. It is not only viable and a resource for our schools, but really, if we start to begin to infuse this in our curriculums from TK all the way through 12th grade, we will start to see growth of our students who have love, self-love, great critical analysis about how they have contributed to this country, and have a ability to grow ourselves into a nice, happy place. I think that ethnic studies is very important because the curriculum just did not at all do our students any justice. It was out of date. And now that we have this opportunity to use community ethnic studies to teach our younger students. Thank you.
Thank you, VanCedric. Mark, same question.
If we ever hope to overturn the systemic white supremacy and racism that has been the foundation of this country for decades or centuries, we need to really honor the people that are part of this community that are not white, and make sure that we are giving equal time to understand the cultures and history of every people that populate this nation. So I strongly support an ethnic studies program. I also believe that this is something that as a board member, it shouldn't be a very difficult choice for me as a board member. We would vote to establish a policy that required ethnic studies education before graduation, and it would be on the administration then to implement that program. I think we would want to follow up with an evaluation of what the program is, but this should be a simple question for every board member in Oakland, that we are strongly in favor of an ethnic studies program.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that takes us to, well, we're at 3:20, and that allows for each person to give a 1 minute summary of anything else you would like to share with the people that are watching this. And we can start with Mark, then VanCedric, then Cherisse.
Thank you. I think I'd like to sort of end with the 3 priorities that I think are most important around what I would do as a board member. And I'm going to adapt one of them right now on the fly as we speak, which is the first priority is a literacy plan for the city of Oakland that takes into account all the needs of every student, and make sure that we are teaching students to have to be able to read at grade level by the 3rd grade. And I think that's table stakes for a school district. I don't think you should have be able to operate schools if you can't teach kids how to read. And I would add to that, that would be where I would also add ethnic studies. I think that's important in terms of addressing systemic white supremacy and racism as the primary issues of our time. The second thing I would advocate for is adopting a digital bridge plan to make sure that every student in this district has access to the internet so that they can learn at home during this period of time when we can't get every kid into school at the same time. And I'd adopt a budgeting policy, a transparency policy around the Oakland Unified Budget.
Thank you, VanCedric. Minute close.
Thank you everyone for having me on this forum today. It's a blessing. I'm really glad to be able to have a conversation with Mark and Cherisse, so thank you. Real quick, what I want to say is that there's three things that I really want to focus on as a board member, which is incorporating community stakeholders' voice. It is mandatory, it is a must. My relationships to strengthen and build community, build power with the community is really important. Second is really developing our community schools. They are the hub of our community. That is where we need to be. We need to really look at that and invest in it. Third is really to uplift our labor partners as well, because their work is often not acknowledged. So I want to make sure that I acknowledge that. As a board member, board director, I will continue to build those relationships to highlight, support, strengthen our relationship with the community. Thank you.
Thank you, VanCedric. Cherisse?
I also want to say thank you for having me. And, you know, as being from Oakland, being from West Oakland, and living here and going to the schools and just having my son recently graduate out of them, you know, I always want to say I believe in the power of the student voice and the perseverance of our families and communities and the economic prosperity of inclusion-based education. And I know how challenging it is to raise a child here and be able to try to advocate for them. And I want to be here for the needs of not only just D3, but for the entire district to improve the education and inclusion for all of our students. Educated students, educated voters. It is now the time to vote this year, and we want to make sure that our communities are taken care of.
Thank you very much. Thank you to Mark Hurty, VanCedric Williams, and Cherisse Gash very much for joining us this afternoon. And I'd like to make note that there were two people who couldn't join us today. Tyron Jordan was supposed to, he was not feeling well, and Maya Edgerly had a death in the family. So I just wanted to note that there are in fact two other candidates who are running in District 3. And thanks to everybody at Action 2020 who participated. And I will turn it over to Clarence to wrap up. Thanks, everybody.
Well, thank you, all the candidates and everyone watching today, for taking the time out of your beautiful Sunday afternoon. The candidates, thank you for your time to be with us today. This is a very historical election coming up here in Oakland for the school board, school district, and the people, communities in Oakland. We are at a crossroads in Oakland, so it's very important that we have quality, sensitive candidates such as yourselves stepping forward and making yourselves available in this very historical time. So we really appreciate you. That concludes this forum. Please visit Action 2020, oakland.org for informational links, updates, and to sign up for our email list for ongoing updates about the school board elections. We thank you for joining us today and have a wonderful afternoon.
And I'd just like to make one announcement, please. We will be having two more forums, one for District 1 and one for District 7. And we will be announcing those dates in the future, but those still will be happening. And again, thanks everybody for your participation. It was a pleasure talking with you all.
Thank you.